tabanids. Okay, ayon. A, C. So, iba-iba yung answer. Okay, let's go through the question. A, distance from breeding grounds. Now, as much as this can be considered as a preventive method, and yes, it can be a mode of prevention. However, tabanids, the nature of tabanids is that they are very strong flyers and they can fly a significant distance. So no matter how far you would bring your animals away from their breeding grounds, again, their breeding grounds are water courses, anywhere where there is a little bit of water and vegetation. No matter how far you would bring them, you would take them. They are go if the tabanus is hungry, they will find them because they are strong enough to fly. So not always the best preventive method. Next, use of insecticides. It can work to a certain degree. The problem is, for some reason, many tabanid species are very resistant to different insecticides. The theory says that it's probably because of their size, since your tabanids tend to be really large flies. They say that the size their size would actually prevent them from allowing them to be more resistant to certain insecticides. So B would not always recommended. Plus, it's also quite harmful. So you would prefer to think of preventive and control strategies that are more practical and in a way better for the environment. So the next is draining of water holes. So you can drain out water holes, especially if they're just waters that develop after a rainy season. The problem is, again, no matter what you do, there's always going to be a tabanus at a further distance. You cannot always drain all the water holes or bodies of water. So they are still going to find your tabanus is still going to find your animals, even if they're from a further distance. So the last one, keeping animals indoors during daylight, is actually the answer here. Why? This is such a simple solution, a simple preventive measure. All you have to do is keep the animals inside, especially during daylight, because your tabanos are actually diurnal. They're active only at during the day. In fact, they are sight hunters. They really do use their eyes to look for their prey. And for some reason, just a small amount of shade, if you keep your animals in a shaded area, tabanos would stop hunting them or they won't go near them. For some reason, they cannot see properly in a very shaded or secluded or indoor environment. So if you keep your animals indoors during peak fly hours, then you would decrease the chances of your animals being attacked by these flies. There's even a point wherein even if there's already a fly that's attached to the animal, it's already drinking blood, and then you bring the livestock indoors, so they're already bringing along with them tabanos. Once indoors, tabanos would stop moving. They would just stay on the wall or stay on the animal. They won't even feed. They would just stop moving. They're very sensitive to light. They would prefer for that there will always be light in this area. So if there's no light, they won't move. They won't do anything. So you just need to keep your animals in a shaded, secluded area during their peak flights. Okay, so I hope you always remember that is that your tabanus likes light, so keep your animals away from the light during active season nila. Okay, let's proceed. Next question. I think we are entering Cyclorapha na. We're entering the Cyclorapha group. So a horse with gastritis was subjected to fecalysis, which yielded positive results for the eggs of the stomach worm of the genus Habronema. Among the following flies, which one is least likely to transmit this roundworm? So this is referring to their ability to vector certain pathogens. So who knows the answer? So the choices is Musca, Califora, Stomoxis, and then none of the above. And answer ng D. Okay, if we get to know who these three are, Musca again is your housefly. Your domesticated housefly. Well, it's not domesticated. Califora is your blue bottle. Your blue bottle fly. The one that is metallic blue in color, metallic blue green, the one that's shiny and quite stout, large flies, and the one that's always found in feces or carrion, those are your Califora. And then last is Tomoxys calcitrans, which is your stable fly. So which among the choices is least likely? You have to highlight that, least likely. Or in any case, it basically means which among them does not carry habronem. Does anyone know the answer? Don't always be deceived whenever you see the choice, none of the above. Sometimes we would go immediately to it without analyzing or checking the choices first. Because, yun nga, none of the above, baka talagang wala talaga sa choices. We don't always jump to none of the above. Anyone with answers? Answer is C. Least likely, least likely. So this is a which among the flies does not carry Habronema? Okay, so Habronema, and its other genus, which is Draschia. These are all roundworms. These are all strongyles, and they are commonly known as the equine stomach worms. They're called the equine stomach worms. And all equine stomach worms are vectored. Their vector, actually, their IH are all Musidae flies. So flies under the under the family Musidae. So of course, at the very start, Musidae, may Musca domestica tayo dito. So Musca domestica is actually a vector. So that means it is again, the question is asking you who is least likely. So Musca is definitely going to carry Habronema. So you're going to cross it out. So among the three remaining choices, what's the answer? B, may nag-answer ng B, yung C, wala nag-answer ng C. Okay, so whoever answered B is correct. Califora vomitoria is not a Musidae fly. Califora vomitoria, the family that it belongs is family Califoridae. Stomoxys calcitrans is a biting Musidae fly, and therefore it's actually closely related. It's basically a cousin to Musca. So Stomoxys calcitrans is a Musidae fly. The answer here is Califora vomitoria. So I hope that's clear. So this is the reason why you still have to review your parasites according to their taxonomic group, because I actually encourage that to my own students. You still have to know their taxonomic group, because just knowing what taxonomic group that they belong to, you can already give a generalized description of the group. So if you know that all equine stomach worms are always carried by Musidae flies, you have to be familiar who are the members of Musidae. So in this case, the members of Musidae is Musca domestica, Stomoxys calcitrans, and Hematobia irritans. Hematobia irritans is the horn fly, the one that's found, those small annoying flies that are covering that are found all over your cattle that they like to swat around. That's actually a Musidae fly as well. Okay, so let us proceed. Ayan, okay. Speaking of which, where are you most likely going to find the adult Hematobia irritans? Again, Hematobia irritans is another cousin of Musca domestica. It is a member of Musidae. So this is Hematobia irritans, the horn fly. Ayun. So what do you think is the answer? They are found A, in the barn, B, resting on flowers, C, resting on the back of cattle, D, resting on the others. Ano yung answer niyo? If you look at the choices, resting on flowers, this is what we call another filler choice. Obviously wrong question, an obviously wrong choice that was just added there to make sure apat yung choices ng question. Ayan. Ayan, C. Kasi na-mention ko kanina, they are resting on the back of cattle. The adults are always found on the back of the cattle. They look like this. They are the annoying ones. They are constantly being swatted by your cattle. Your Hematobia irritans are will carry, ano nga yung kinikarry niya? They carry a filarial worm known as haba to eh. Filaria stilesi. Yan. This is a skin filarial worm. And I don't know if you ever saw one. I have seen it when I had the opportunity to necropsy a cattle, and they were in the subcutaneous tissue. These are long filarial worms. They are found in the subcutaneous tissue of the skin of your cattle, particularly at the back, which makes sense because that is where Hematobia irritans is also located on the back of the hose. So they can, wherever they bite down, that's where the worms will be located. Okay. Others would be wrong because again, they are found at the back of the hose. In terms of their life cycle, Hematobia irritans, again, only the adults stay on the back of the hose. But when they lay their eggs, they actually wait for the cattle to defecate. So when they pass fresh feces, Hematobia will jump from the back and then go down to the feces and lay their eggs there because their larva will feed on the feces. Then they go back to the back of your cattle. Because there's a question, I think there's a question in the board exam that asks where Hematobia irritans would lay their eggs. So since they don't lay their eggs on the back of the hose, they will lay their eggs on freshly passed feces. Okay, next. Okay, where does the female Glossina lay her eggs? So this is Glossina fly. Ayan, only found in sub-Saharan Africa. Where does a female Glossina lay her eggs? Anyone with an answer? Anyone who knows the answer? Just because wala siya sa Pilipinas doesn't mean we don't study them. Okay, we don't know. Maybe someone in this new generation with vets would end up of all places in Africa to work there. So ayun. Anyone who an answer? Remember your fly? They are the causative. They are the vector of the trypanosomes that causes African sleeping sickness. Let's see. Ayun, B. Yun. Ano yung mga answer nyo? Iba-iba yung answer nyo. Okay, B. Ayun. Ang daming nagkamali. Okay, I like to throw this question around because it's a question that it's a very simple question, but it's also a question that tests you if you actually really read the question. Now, the answer here is none of the above. Why? Because Glossina does not lay eggs. They are viviparous. They actually mature a single larva inside their uterus, inside their abdomen. So technically, Glossina does not lay eggs. So they give birth to a larva. So it's none of the above. If assuming this statement was, if the question says, where does the female Glossina birth her larva, then the answer would be on the ground. Because they like to give birth to their larva on the ground so that their larva will burrow itself immediately under the soil. But they don't lay eggs. They give birth. You can see it in the photo that it's actually giving birth to a single larva. It's actually already larval stage 3 as well, because they have 3 larval instars. They have 3 instars, and all 3 instars develop inside their uterus, and then they will immediately give birth to a single mature larva, and it's already ready to pupate. It's already going to pupate immediately. Okay? So, I like to throw this question around a lot with my students, and ang daming nauto dito. Kasi yun nga, none of the above. That happens if you don't take the time to properly read the question. You probably know that Glossina is viviparous. But you did not read the question properly, so you would immediately answer A. Na wrong naman talaga siya eh, kasi walang eggs yun, Lucina. Another fun fact about Lucina, the way for you to identify them, you can identify them by their wing. The center, which is known as the medial cell, is shaped like a hatchet, which is basically a large cleaver knife. This is actually a very important fact that is constantly being repeated by my professor back then. I heard that it came out in the board exam asking, a question was asking which this fly has a ariste. An ariste is a feather-like appendage on the antenna. It has an ariste, this one part here. It has an ariste that is unilaterally plumose, which only has on the dorsal side. So if this is the antenna, this part is actually the antenna of the fly. They have an ariste like this, and an ariste looks like a feather, but your Glossina is unilaterally plumose, meaning only one side would have the feather-like structure, and it's always the dorsal side. So that question came out in one of the previous board exams. And another part of that question is they also have a hatchet-shaped medial cell on their wings. So the answer would be Glossina. If this is in the case, if the question is referring to the morphology of the arthropod. Okay, let's go to the next. Okay, this gut bacterium is present in tsetse flies but absent in mosquitoes, which contributes to why mosquitoes are common vectors of viruses. Therefore, the eradication of this bacteria in mosquitoes can help reduce cases of dengue fever in humans. So who knows the answer here? I hope na-cover to siya sa schools niyo. Who knows the answer here? This gut bacterium that we're talking about is an endosymbiotic bacteria found in flies. It's found in flies. Found in the tsetse fly. The tsetse fly in this case. Who knows the answer? Anyone? So we have Wolbachia, Sodalis, Wigglesworthia, and all of the above. Anyone knows the answer? Parang walang alam ha, kasi tahimik in comment section. A. Anyone else have an answer? C. Again, okay lang na wrong. Just give us your answer based on what you can recall. B. Ayan. Okay. I don't know if na-cover to siya, but I find this very important because your biting arthropods does have their own normal normal fauna inside their body that actually contributes to their survival or ability to carry diseases. So before I reveal the answer, I'm going to show you this. Oh, sorry. This one. This is straight from my PowerPoints in my class. Okay, so the endosymbiotic bacteria found in tsetse flies. So we have 3 of them. We have Wolbachia, Wigglesworthia, and Stodalis. Now, here's the thing. We'll start with Wolbachia. 50% of all insects living on Earth right now are carrying Wolbachia, and another 50% does not carry them. Okay, what is the importance of Wolbachia? Now, insects that naturally have Wolbachia inside their body, if they naturally have it, they're actually able to be protected against, they're actually resistant to very common viruses that kills insects. They're resistant to common viruses that will kill them. If your tsetse flies, what else? Your Tabanus also has Wolbachia inside their body. And it actually helps them survive better in the environment because they cannot be hit by any of the viruses that can normally kill other insects. So that's the importance of Wolbachia. It increases their chances of survival because against, it increases their chances of survival because they cannot just die from common viruses. Now, the problem is there's a group of, again, 50% of your insects does not have Wolbachia. And an example of that are mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are not carrying Wolbachia, meaning they can be killed by any insect virus. But they can actually also carry viruses. When I say viruses, it doesn't necessarily, it's not exclusive to viruses that hurt insects. It can be viruses that are found in animals and in humans. And this is the reason why mosquitoes can carry different kinds of viruses because they don't have Wolbachia. So they can carry viruses. Meanwhile, your flies and even your tabanus, the diseases, the pathogens that we carry are mainly protozoal or helminth. They don't actually carry, or bacterial. They don't actually carry viruses with them. They are not known to pass viruses. That's because they have Wolbachia. So because they have Wolbachia, they cannot carry viruses. Now, the answer to that question would be Wolbachia, because what is being done now, it's even done here in the Philippines, it's also done in other parts of the world, is that they will actually capture and breed mosquitoes that are already infected with Wolbachia. They will experimentally infect mosquitoes with Wolbachia. And in that case, those mosquitoes would not be able to carry dengue. They would not be able to carry Eastern equine encephalitis virus. They cannot carry Zika. They cannot carry all of the viruses that is commonly passed by mosquitoes. They become, in a way, they won't be carriers of that. And the thing is, Wolbachia is actually passed maternally. So all female flies, if they have their offspring, the offsprings will already be infected with Wolbachia as well. And all those female offsprings can pass Wolbachia to their own offsprings as well. So the mosquitoes that were experimentally infected with Wolbachia will also pass this on. If they are female, they will pass it on to their own offsprings. So it means that they are what scientists are doing now is that they're trying to release a population of mosquitoes in the environment that is already infected with Wolbachia. So the mosquitoes so that they can one day overpower the population of mosquitoes that are not infected with it. So I hope clear lang yan. I hope I was able to explain that clearly. It's very difficult to explain if it's online kasi. Now, the other endosymbiotic bacteria in flies is Wigglesworthia. The purpose of Wigglesworthia, the function of this bacteria, is that they actually provide nutritional support for the larva of the female. Because remember, the female are viviparous. They harbor the they call this the they harbor the larva inside their uterus. So they actually produce what we call milk, their own version of milk that they feed their larva inside their uterus. So that milk is that Wigglesworthia is found in the milk glands. So it's pretty much gives them support, nutritional support. If we get rid of Wigglesworthia from the body of flies become sterile because since they cannot feed their larva inside their uterus, then the larva will die. So basically, they cannot reproduce properly. The last one is Sodalis. Sodalis is important because this is the bacteria that allows flies and tabanus to carry trypanosomes. Without Sodalis, flies cannot carry trypanosoma. So what is being done as a eradication and control protocol is that they would capture flies, then irradiate them with X-ray or gamma rays. The radiation actually kills the bacteria inside their body. So all bacteria. So if you get rid of Wigglesworthia inside flies, they become susceptible to insect viruses. They will die. If you get rid of Wigglesworthia, they cannot even increase their population since they all become sterile. So they die off. If you get rid of Sodalis, you decrease the risk of passing African sleeping sickness and other trypanosomiasis to your animals and humans. So overall, that has worked. That has worked in the island of Zanzibar because, of course, it's an island, so secluded kasi, so kayang ma-eradicate. But in Africa, it's still being done. It's a bit difficult because Africa is a large continent, so it's difficult to control the populations of tsetse flies. Just take note that Wolbachia and Sodalis would also be present in your Tabanus. Wigglesworthia is not present because Tabanus is oviparous kasi they lay eggs. Okay, so go again. The question, the answer here would be Wolbachia. If Sodalis, without Sodalis, if we remove this, low chances of trypanosomiasis. They cannot carry trypanosoma. If you remove Wigglesworthia, then sterility. So that's the other possible questions. Okay, let's go to the next. Okay, the adult of this louse fly possesses wings, but later break them off when they find a suitable host. Who knows the answer? So all four choices are actually Hippobosca, or members of family Hippobosidae, also known as your louse flies, kids. Rather weird looking flies. They are still true flies. They're just weird looking. They are dorsoventrally flattened and they kind of look like lice. That's why they're called louse flies. Okay, so who do you think is the answer? What do you think is the answer? Daming nag-answer B. B. Okay. It's B because Malophagus ovinus does not have wings. Yan ang reason. Kasi if you look here, talagang walang wings si sheepked. It's called a ked because they don't have wings. If they have wings, you call it louse fly. But actually, Malophagus ovinus is wrong. The answer here is D. Lipoptina cervi. Why? Malophagus ovinus is born, well, technically born as in lumabas sila sa pupa. They are born without wings. So what's the point of saying that they break off their wings if they find a suitable host? If in the first place, they don't even have wings. They are the only fly that is born without wings. So remember, kasi diptera pa to eh. So fly to siya, pero it doesn't have wings. It's the only fly without wings. So Malophagus ovinus, born without wings. However, Lipoptina cervi, this one over here, the deer ked. There's a reason why it's called ked. Bakit tawag sa kanya ked? If my wings naman siya, dapat louse fly. It's actually a ked because they are born with wings. And then when they fly, they use those wings to look for a host. Once they found a host, they will settle on that host. And there's no reason for them to leave because they already have a proper food source and shelter. So they actually break off their wings and then become a permanent ectoparasite on those animals. So they are normally infesting deer, but because they don't really know where they're going when they're flying, they can end up in humans, they can end up in animals as well. So Lipoptina cervi in the deer ked, this one breaks off those wings, so you might find them na wala ng wings. The difference between the two, Malophagus ovinus is exclusively found in sheep, and wala na siyang wings, wala din siyang halters, while Lipoptina cervi, even if he broke off the wings, may halters pa rin sila. Okay. The rest, Hippobosca and Pseudolincia, will forever have wings talaga to. Okay? Please take note of this. Even though they're not found in the Philippines, they're mainly found in Europe and they're mainly found in Europe and America kasi northern hemisphere sila. Pero they are not found in the Philippines, but then again, you don't know if you might end up working abroad kasi. Ayun. Let's go to the next. Which of the following best defines primary myiasis? Ayun, so we have to remember and define myiasis. Which of the following best defines primary myiasis? Anyone? A, it is caused by fly larva that feeds on necrotic tissue. B, it requires a living host. C, it is caused by maggots. D, it requires a host to be near a dead body. Anyone has an answer? Ano nga yun, meiosis? You have to recall what meiosis is. C, someone says C. C. Okay, the majority answer is C. Bakit C? Kasi may maggots. And you all know that meiosis is caused by maggots. Okay, so C is not the best answer, although it is something that defines meiosis. It does not define primary meiosis. Okay, when we say maggots, maggots is basically equivalent to larva. It doesn't matter if I use the term larva or maggots. Okay, we all know that meiosis is caused by larva of a cycloraphan fly or maggots of a cycloraphan fly. It's the same, it's just synonymous. Now, we have to look for the best answer. And we have to remember what meiosis and if the term what does it mean when it's called primary meiosis. So again, meiosis is defined as an infestation of fly larva on living, of course, in a living host, in a host. Usually this is on wounds, on orifices of the body, ayon. Basta these are infestation of the larva on the host and the larva is feeding on the host. The larva, synonymous with maggots, sometimes we also call them grubs, we also call them bots. Ayan. But what does it mean if primary? What does it mean if primary siya? Why do we have what is the pathological terms of diseases that we would call primary, secondary, tertiary? Bakit may mga ganon? Okay, so primary meiosis is when, how do I best explain it? Primary meiosis is mainly caused by a fly, which is an obligate parasite. An obligate parasite, if the fly is an obligate parasite, it means that they really need to look for a living animal. Diba? They really need a living animal. And in this case, that fly needs a living host so that they can allow their larva to feed on a living host. So the answer here is actually B, because primary meiosis is when an obligate parasite needs to put their larva to leave their larva on a living host. It cannot be C because primary meiosis is caused by maggots, but also secondary meiosis can also be caused by maggots. So it does not best defines primary meiosis because it only refers to meiosis in general. It does not refer to primary meiosis only. D, it requires a host to be near a dead body is not necessarily true because even if that host is near a dead body, it will not always lead to meiosis. And A, it is a fly larva that feeds on necrotic tissue. This is false. A actually refers to secondary meiosis. And secondary meiosis is the opposite of, is different from primary meiosis. Kasi kanina, primary meiosis is caused by an obligate parasite. Secondary meiosis is caused by a facultative parasite. It is caused by the maggots of a facultative parasite. And an example of that I can give you is Musca domestica, the housefly, because we know that their larvae, their maggots can be found on wounds of your patients, of your animals. But the maggots of Musca domestica naturally feeds on decaying organic matter. And that's why they can be found on carcasses. But necrotic tissue is basically similar to a dead body. So if Musca happens upon an animal with a necrotic festering wound, for them, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a living animal or a dead animal, because for them that small wound that is necrotic is equivalent to a dead animal. So they can always fly there and leave their eggs there so that their larva can feed on the necrotic tissue. The maggots of your housefly is not meant to be on a living animal. But then again, the animal has exhibit conditions that are equivalent to their natural habitat, which is basically dead bodies. So that's why it's considered secondary myiasis. Again, the answer here is B, because that is the best way to define primary myiasis. Your primary myiasis is caused by an obligate parasitic fly, and obligate parasites require living hosts. Okay, let's go next. Which method is best for generic identification of the fly that cause cutaneous myiasis in a patient? So basically, how would you know what genus of fly is causing the myiasis? Anyone knows the answer? How do you know what genus of fly is causing the myiasis? Mukhang mag-e-extend talaga tayo after no 6. Okay. Anyone? C? May nag-answer ng C? C is measuring the larval size and presence of spines. D, conducting microscopic examination of the posterior spiracles of the larva. Anyone else? Wala pa? Okay, so the answer here is actually D, the conducting microscopic examination of the larval posterior spiracles. The posterior spiracles is their breathing apparatus. It's how they get oxygenation. So it cannot be seen because larval size vary among different species, and also the larval instar. Because the more they eat and the more they molt, they get bigger and bigger. And even when they are, for example, larval stage 3, they can still get bigger than those who just molted. So size is not always the size and the presence of spine is not always the best way to identify their genus. Waiting until the larva pupates and identifying the adult that emerges, yeah, because that can tell you that you can, if you can identify the adult, but it's possibly a waste of time. It's not practical for you to wait until the larva pupates, because it will take 1 to 2 weeks before the adult emerge. And A, observing the larva's behavior in a controlled laboratory setting. That's also not practical because their behavior is the same. They will just keep on eating and eating and growing and growing. So hindi reliable. So the answer is actually D. You can identify the genus of the larva by the appearance of their posterior spiracles. And here's an example. So these are the posterior spiracles of common myiasis-causing larva. So we have the housefly, Musca domestica. So if you look here at the posterior spiracles, it's usually a pair, and they always have 3 slits. Each slit represents its larval instar, because all Cycloraphan dipteran flies actually have 3 instars. So they have instar 1, 2, and 3 before they pupate. So for every instar, they gain a slit. In housefly, their slit is S-shaped. So it would be like this: 1, 2, 3, like that. So if it's larval instar 1, it will just have 1. If it's 2, 2, and so on and so forth. Okay. In Calliphoridae, which includes your green bottleflies, your blue bottleflies, yung mga common myiasis-causing flies talaga, the ones that we typically see, they call this, their posterior spiracles will be diagonal slits. They're very diagonal, always 3, 1, 2, 3. They would have a button in here, and it's called a closed peritreme. The entire thing is called a peritreme. Peri is around, trime is 3. So 3 slits around, covered by a border, a round border. So we have it here, the closed peritreme with 3 diagonal slits. But if it's a screwworm fly, so a screwworm fly that includes your Chrysomia bezina, your Cochleomya omnivora screwworm flies, yan tawag nila. They would have the same appearance. The only difference is that they lack buttons, so the buttons are absent over here. And Sarcophagidae, if you recall what Sarcophaga is, Sarcophaga hemorrhoidalis, this is that large gray-colored fly with red eyes. And if you look at the abdomen, may parang, checkerboard pattern siya sa abdomen. So that's actually Sarcophaga. Very common. I see them a lot. I have so many specimens of them. I can't count. They're very common here in the Philippines. So they are actually also causes meiosis. In fact, they don't even lay eggs. They immediately produce they're viviparous, so they immediately produce so many larvae over the carcass or in wounds as well. So their posterior spiracles would also be 3 slits, but they would be a lot more vertical like that. So you can see it here, a lot more vertical slits. Okay, so I'm not sure if this is going to come out in the board exam. Once in a while, I read one question or students or past alumni was able to share na may lumabas na ganon. Hindi daw na-cover sa parasitology nila. So I just added that in, so just in case you would need to find out what type of larva was found in a particular host. Okay, let's go to the next. Meaning, ayan. You were presented with a rescued case based naman to. Rescued 8-year-old Shih Tzu that was found neglected outside a storage shed. The dog's hair was extremely matted and soiled. The matted fur was shaved off and discovered lesions on the underlying skin containing 50 to 100 smooth, cream-colored maggots. The fly causing this lesion is most likely what? Anyone has an answer? We have Cutirabra, Gastrophilus, Califora, and Hypoderma. Anyone? Baka nang confused. Sino to sila? Ano tong mga flies na to? Because ayun nga, there's so many of them to memorize. Sometimes we are not familiar with their genus or scientific name. You might be familiar with their common name. Cutirabra is known as the rodent botfly. Gastrophilus is the equine stomach botfly. Califora is your blue bottle fly, and Hypoderma is the ox warble fly. Anyone knows the answer? Our 8-year-old Shih Tzu with extremely matted and soiled fur. And then you discovered maggots. Maybe sa sobrang baho ng fur nila, it attracted flies. For the fly, they think it's just a dead body, or because it basically smells like a dead body. So what's your answer? Yon. So the answer here is Califora. Whenever you have a case like that in small animal practice, it's most likely a Califoridae fly. It's either the blue bottle fly, Califora vomitoria, or it could be the green bottle fly, which is Lucilia cuprina. Lucilia cuprina, Lucilia sericata. Pwede sila yun. But it will almost always be a Califoridae fly. Cutirabra is not found in the Philippines. It's actually found in North America. It's the one that you see, I hope you've seen videos of it, in sobrang laking maggot. In fact, that's the reason why they're called bots, because they're bigger than a regular maggot. These are really large, dark-colored maggots or bots that are usually, if you ever saw a video of it, it's found on the face of your cats. It's found on the neck of the cats, and they usually requires to be pulled out by a veterinarian. So ayun, yun ang Cutirabra. The reason why it's called the rodent bot fly is because the fly actually lays the eggs of the Cutirabra adult actually lays their eggs on rodent burrows. So the natural host of Cutirabra are actually rodents and rabbits. But because dogs and cats like to hunt your rodents and rabbits, ayun, sila na tuloy yung naging biktima. Kasi they were close nearby the burrows, the larva decide to attach to the dog or cat instead. Gasterophilus is the equine stomach botfly. This is the one wherein the maggots are actually found in the found in the mucosal lining of the stomach. So the eggs are laid on the body of the legs of your horse. Then the larva will climb up towards the mouth where they can penetrate your oral cavities. They can cause ulcers in the mouth, and then they make their way down to the stomach where they will feed on the stomach lining. They will grow there until they're ready to pupate. When they're ready to pupate, they let go and allow themselves to be passed out in feces. So that's your gasterophilus. Sa pangalan niya, gastero means stomach, philus, love. So it loves the stomach. So it's a stomach botfly. Ayun. It's actually non-pathogenic. It's usually an incidental finding. But ayun, so if you do find one, they look like they're pretty much large maggots lining found in the stomach. Then hypoderma, the ox warble fly, pretty much the same. The adult will lay their eggs on the body, on the hair of the host, where the maggots, the larva will hatch and then will penetrate the skin. They will climb up from the legs to the back, where they can form these warbles. So these are large subcutaneous nodules that has a hole in the center. And the reason for that hole is so that the larva, the bot, can actually gain oxygen. So that's the purpose of the hole. And if they're ready to pupate, they simply push out from the warble and leave through the small hole on the surface. Ayan. So those are all your bot flies, the ox warble. And the answer in this case would be your Califora. If it's not enough the fact that the host was just a dog, the description of the maggot also helps because Califora has smooth cream-colored maggots. They actually look like maggots of musca, but a little bit bigger and thicker. The rest, Cutelabra, Gastrophilus, and Hypoderma, their maggots are really big. They're huge, covered with spines pa naman. So it does not match the description. So here's a size comparison of Myiasis larvae from different families. So not all of them are included here. I just highlighted the common ones. So we have Musca domestica, the smallest maggot that you would find in a case of Myiasis, and Califora. By the way, all of these are already larval stage 3 because that's their mature stage already, larval stage 3. This is the one that's ready to pupate. We have Musca, followed by Califora, as well as Lucilia, Chrysomia, which is your screwworm flies, Sarcophaga, Cuterabra, here's the one that's found on the faces of cats that you can see in videos. And the last one is the largest, the ox warble fly. Their larva is up to 30 millimeters in size and also quite thick. So if you imagine that on the back of your cattle, these large nodules with a hole at top, inside each warble will be one larva inside. And they can get so big that they can go deeper into the tissue. Since they are found near the spinal cord, they can press down on the spinal cord and then can cause paralysis. Some of them, another species of Hypoderma lineatum, instead of being at the back, they like to be around the esophagus. So if they get bigger and bigger, they can actually squeeze around the esophagus, so it will prevent your cattle from properly swallowing food, so they can die from what do you call this? They can die from anorexia because they could not eat properly. Yeah. So let's proceed. Next question, I just mentioned this. So the larva of Hypoderma lineatum penetrates the skin and mainly develops inside warbles at a particular area of the body of their host. Based on your knowledge of the larva's migratory site, which of the following pathologies would the host manifest due to infestation of these spots? So I just mentioned that hypoderma lineatus, predilection site of the larva, is around the neck and esophagus. So you would have to look among the choices, which of them would have something to do with being around the neck. So the answer here would definitely be B, because there's swelling around the esophagus, which hinders swallowing. Sometimes my case did that they actually make breathing difficult as well, because they can also press on the trachea of the cattle. So it always depends on where they ended up. Formation of abscess and ulceration of the oral cavity actually refers to gastrophilus. It refers to gastrophilus because in order to reach the stomach, they still have to penetrate the mouth. They have to penetrate the oral cavity. So they can cause ulcerations and abscess. Lumbar paralysis refers to hypoderma bovis, because again, this is the one where the predilection site is actually the back, the dorsal end of, or the dorsal surface of your cattle. Then the last one, increased nasal discharges due to septic sinusitis, is caused by a bot known as Oestrus ovis. Oestrus ovis is commonly called the sheep nasal botfly. So what this fly does is that they are viviparous, so they actually fly around the face of your sheep and pretty much shoots their larva into the nostrils so that the larva can develop inside the nasal cavity of your sheep. If the larva is ready to pupate, they simply fall out through the nose as well. Okay, so please take note. We don't have botflies in the Philippines. We only have the caliphorids and the sarcophagidae flies as myiasis causing flies. Still, again, they might come out considered, they are considered as exotic parasites now. Okay, let's proceed. Managing the control of wool strike by the fly Lucilia cuprina in sheep without the use of expensive insecticides is best employed through which of the following methods? Anyone knows the answer? D. May nag-answer ng D. Ano pa? Anyone else? D. D. Okay. D. So that's actually correct. Shearing of the wool around the perianal area and legs. So this is quite common. Wool strike is quite common. It's always the green bottle fly, Lucilia cuprina, the green bottle fly. That's always the cause of the wool strike, or also known as blow strike. Sometimes it can also be Califora vomitoria, but it's most of the time it's Lucilia cuprina. So that happens when the wool is constantly soiled with feces and urine. So it smells like a dead body already. So Lucilia is actually a facultative parasite. So they cause secondary myiasis. So Lucilia would mistake it for feces, or they would mistake the animals for feces because of the smell. So they will lay their eggs there instead. So it will cause what is known as cutaneous myiasis or wool strike. So you simply have to simply have to prevent them by making sure that the fur is not soiled. So if you shear the wool around the areas which is constantly easily soiled, like the legs, the perianal areas, and if it's male, you also shave the wool around the pubis, because urine can also soil it, man. So you shave it around there, and then that will also help. Keeping the animals away from water courses is not for Lucilia, since they don't have anything to do with being near water. Um, Keeping the animals indoors during peak fly hours is for Tabanus, and oral ivermectin is not always effective for at least as for fly prevention, because wool strike can always happen only if there is soiled wool in your sheep. Okay, let's proceed to the next. The following flies are known to lay their eggs in decaying organic matter, except. So one of the choices does not lay their eggs on decaying organic matter. So if you don't know who these four are, I'll show you. We have Stomoxys calcitrans, the stable fly, Sarcophaga hemorrhoidalis, the red-tailed flesh fly. This is again the one that has a checkerboard pattern in their abdomen. Lucilia cuprina, again, your green bottle fly, and Dermatobia hominis, your human botfly. So does anyone know the answer? A, Stomoxys calcitrans. A, none. Okay, when I say decaying organic matter, this can mean any decaying organic matter. It can be carcass, it can be necrotic tissue, it can be dead leaves, it can be decaying fruits, it can be decaying food, it can be feces. Those are all decaying organic matter. And it can also be hay that has been soiled with urine and feces. They are all going to decay easily. So it's called decaying organic matter. The answer in this case is actually Dermatobia hominis, the human botfly. Stomoxys calcitrans lay their eggs on feces, especially in beddings or hay that has been soiled with urine and feces. So it's a decaying organic matter. Sarcophaga hemorrhoidalis actually lays their no, they actually give birth to their larva because they're viviparous kasi. They give birth to their larva on on carcass. They look for carcasses. So hindi din siya decaying organic matter in body, dead bodies. Lucilia cuprina, feces or soil wool, basically decaying organic matter for them. Dermatobia hominis is actually quite strange. It's a botfly. So you would expect that they would lay their eggs on on human skin, so that their eggs can pretty much, their larva that hatches would feed on the skin of the human because they're botflies. They're myiasis causing botflies. They're all obligate parasites pa naman. Dermatobia hominis actually does it in a different way. Dermatobia would capture other insects, particularly mosquitoes and other blood-sucking arthropods, blood-sucking flies. They would capture them, lay their eggs on the fly, and then leave. The fly, let's say it's a mosquito, it was captured by Dermatobia. The Dermatobia will turn mosquito into their slave. They will lay their eggs on the mosquito, and then they leave. The mosquito will then fly to a host, to a human. And of course, when they land on the human, the heat that a human emits will actually trigger the eggs from to hatch. So when the eggs will hatch, the larva will then fall into the human skin and then they will penetrate through the bite of the mosquito. So Dermatobia hominis employs a slave fly so that they can deliver their eggs to their host, which are humans. So it kind of looks like this. So this is Dermatobia capturing in the photo. This is Dermatobia capturing another fly. Then they would actually lay their banana-shaped eggs on the body of the fly, so that when the fly lands on a host, those eggs will make it to their human host eventually. We have here also in the Musca domestica, as well as Stomoxys calcitrans. Those are all Dermatobia eggs. So this actually came out in my board exam. There was a question that I think the question goes like, this fly employs other biting flies to deliver their eggs into their to humans. So it's something like that. So Dermatobia came out in the board exam. Derma, we don't have Dermatobia hominis in the Philippines na naman. But then it's an exotic parasite. So it's mainly found in North America. Okay, andito na tayo sa fleas. We're halfway there. Sorry guys, medyo mag-extend talaga tayo kasi ang haba ng ng parasitology din. Okay, so we're now in fleas. So I think this is a really important question. It does not always come out in the board exam, but I think it's really important for you to know what's the difference between Stenocephalidis felis, the cat flea, and Stenocephalidis canis, the dog flea. And I think this is quite almost a topic that is constantly being repeated in veterinary entomology. So does anyone know the answer here? The following statements are true regarding fleas from the genus Stenocephalides, except. So statements are true with one exception. So there are 3 true statements and 1 false. So who do you think is the false statement? What do you think is the false statement? Anyone? D, D. Okay, so why don't you help me out? We're going to go through each of the questions and I want you to write T if true in statement or F if false in statement. Okay, A. Stenocephalides felis, the cat flea has a more elongated head versus C. canis. Is this true or false? Anyone? For true. Sabi ni Miss Perez, true. Anyone else? True. False, sabi ni Miss Daniega. Anyone else? Is statement A true or false? Okay, so statement A is actually true. So, Stenocephalides felis, we can zoom in. Kaya ba natin mag-zoom in dito? Ayun. Ayun, felis has a longer head, more elongated head compared to your canis, which has a more rounded head. So this statement is true. Let's go for choice B. The first genal comb spine in Stenocephalides canis is shorter. True or false? Ayun. So if you don't recall, the genal comb is these darker combs that are found underneath the head. So that's the genal combs. The combs that are at the back of the head is called pronotal combs. So what is B, true or false? Someone says true. Ano pa? True. Ayun, it's actually true. The first genocomb spine in C. canis is shorter. In fact, that's one of the ways to differentiate canis and felis. I usually just go to the first comb of the genospine, this one over here. The first one, if it's usually half the size than the